Good evening, Peter. This is Sarah Absher, the director of the department. Just thought I'd do a sound check. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I read those, that came in on me.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Peter, can you hear me? Asking phone number ending in 1432. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Sir, I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone. If you would like to speak during public comment period, when the chair calls out for for additional public comment, if you have not signed up, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
So much.
All the same ones from the email?
Yeah.
I read those.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us online. The Planning Commission is going to take a moment to read testimony that was received over the last couple of days. We will be starting here as soon as the chair is ready. Until then, I'm going to head and put the meeting on mute and mute all participants that are currently muted. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You ready? Yeah. Okay, and we are on.
All right. Good evening. I'm going to call the June 25th, 2026 meeting of the Tillamook County Commission to order. The first order of business is roll call.
Don LaFrance.
Megan Gillis.
Gail Uzel.
Guy Seaver.
Chad Allen,
Is Mark?
Commissioner Roberts is not joining us this evening.
Okay, I saw the MR and didn't know if that was him or not. All right. Next is old business, and having none, we'll move on to new business, which is number 851-25-000-533 PLNG, a variance request to exceed the 25-foot height maximum by 8 feet 10 1/4 inches for a maximum building height of 33 feet 10 1/4 inches as measured from existing pre-construction grade for the proposed reconstruction of a single-family dwelling. The subject property is located within the Breakers condominium, unit number 11, located in the unincorporated community of Nespelin. The subject property is accessed via Breakers Boulevard, County Road, zoned Nespelin Low Density Residential, NESKR-1, and designated as tax lot 92411 of section 25 CB, Township 5 South, Range 11 West of the Willamette Meridian, Tillamook County, Oregon. The applicant is Ready to Market LLC, and the property owner is Wells Fargo Bank, NA, trustee. A sign-up list is being circulated for those who wish to testify and for those who wish to provide their names and addresses so that we formally notify them of the results of the hearing. Staff will hand out copies of the applicable criteria. And the following are required by ORS 197763. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward these criteria, if applicable, or other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to afford us and other interested persons an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow Tillamook County or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court pursuant to ORS Chapter 197. Any party is entitled to a continuance of this hearing if anyone provides documents or evidence in support of the application in addition to what was available at the time that notice of this hearing was provided. In the conduct of quasi-judicial land use hearings, unless there is a continuance, if a participant so requests before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, the record shall remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing. ORS 197763-6. The order of presentation is as follows. Staff will summarize the staff report to the extent necessary to enable those present to understand the issues before the commission. Commission members may ask questions of staff. We'll have the applicant's presentation, then time for public comment, then any rebuttals by the applicant and further comments from staff. The hearing will then be closed to all testimony. The commission may discuss the issue amongst themselves, will either make a decision at that time, continue the public hearing until a specified time, or take the matter under advisement and announce their recommendation at a specified time. Is there a challenge to the jurisdiction of the Tillamook County Planning Commission to hear this matter? If so, please state the challenge at this time. Are there any conflicts of interest or personal biases to be declared by a commission member? If so, please state the bias or conflict at this time.
Madam Chair, so I've visited the site many times. after the fire, so I've seen the property clear after the fire. Live in Nescoin, so I'm quite familiar with this place.
Have there been any ex parte contacts regarding the upcoming matter that a board member needs to declare? If so, please declare the ex parte contacts at this time. All right. We'll have the staff report.
Please, I'm to present. I know, I didn't know you could kick out county employees. I didn't think. I think they were all one long. Big one, okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Melissa Yates, Senior Planner for Tillamook County, for the record. Tonight, as Chair Russell stated, we're hearing a variance request 851-25-0000533-PLMG. As stated, the applicant is Ready to Market LLC, and the property owner is Wells Fargo Bank, acting as a trustee for the O'Donnell for Casey Trust. I probably mispronounced that. I'll allow the applicant's team to verify. Generally, just the variance request before you is an exception to the 25-foot building height allowed in the Nescoin low-density residential zone for oceanfront properties. The applicants are requesting an exception of approximately 8 feet, 10 inches, 10 1/4 inches, for a proposed maximum building height of 33 feet, 10 1/4 inches. This variance request is due to the reconstruction of a dwelling that was lost during a fire. And the property itself is part of the Breakers condominium plat, specifically unit number 11. So just some general information about the request. I also want to call out, just for the record, there was additional testimony that has been received since the staff report was prepared last week that has been passed out to the commission members here in the room. You had an opportunity to review that before the start of the meeting. For anybody in the room that would like to view the testimony as well, there's copies that are on the back table. And then for anybody listening online, there is also copies of the testimony posted on the land use application page for this request for review. Okay, so going back to the request, again, this subject property is located in the unincorporated community of Nescoin, specifically off of Breakers Boulevard. It's located at the intersection of Breakers and Sheridan Avenue, and then the previously vacated Mount Angel Avenue, which now serves as a beach access point. The property abuts the state beach with the adjacent beach access, and then located to the east of the subject property is the Nescoin Golf Course. The area is generally improved with single-family dwellings, residential development. The dominant zone in the area is the Nescoin low-density residential zone, with the Nescoin commercial zone located further to the south, and the Nescoin rural residential zone located to the east, primarily with the golf course and further adjacent residential properties. This is just a map to show you the subject property, again, primarily breaking down the plat map that was generated for a Breakers condominium. As stated in the staff report, this property was platted in approximately 1970s when the 11 units were platted for the Breakers condominium. It was platted prior to there being a land use review requirement for plats of condos, and there still is no land division review that happens for condos as they are not partitions. So this was platted previously around the 1970s, and the dwelling unit that previously occupied unit 11 was built approximately 1971, 1972.
As you can see, property, the Breakers condominium plats, generally square property, and then unit 11 here sits on the westerly portion of the property and also has a platted buildable area of approximately a 20 by 30 area with another 20 feet that was kind of platted for like deck areas, outdoor seating areas. The property itself, abutting the state beach, has riprap revetment that borders that westerly boundary of the property. And as was included in the maps, the property itself is entirely located within the special flood hazard area. I wanted to provide a comparison of the maps as this was discussed within the staff report as well, but the property itself, when the development was originally made in the 1970s, the buildings were not located within an area of special flood hazard. Predominant portion of this reach of Nesco in here off of Breakers was also not within the special flood hazard area. The riprap revetment pretty much protected that area of the property's landward from being mapped within the special flood hazard area. When Tillamook County adopted revised flood maps in 2018, a predominant portion of these oceanfront properties in Nesco were absorbed within the special flood hazard area and is reflected in the map that's included in Exhibit A of the staff report. The property is also, as mentioned in the report, within other geologic hazard areas, the beach and dune hazard overlay, and the Nesquin coastal hazards area. A previous Nesquin coastal hazards area permit was issued for this property a couple of years ago and is currently active on the site for that future reconstruction standards. So why are we here? Why is this variance request before you? Based on the applicant's request, the Nesquin R1 zone for oceanfront properties has a 25-foot height maximum. The applicant is proposing, based on the requirements of the flood regulations in the Tillamook County flood hazard overlay, when reconstruction or substantial improvement occurs to a structure, regardless of whether or not the previous structure complied, because of that reconstruction, new development has to comply with current flood standards. And with the 2018 maps, this has required the elevation of any new structure to be located on the site, as well as specifically a pile or pier foundation style. So we don't get to see like an enclosed foundation style. It has to be an elevated building on piles or piers. So the applicant's request is to elevate a similar square footage and stories of living space that previously was exhibited upon the site. And they're wanting to elevate that structure to compliance with the current flood hazard overlay. And as such, based on that design, will exceed the 25-foot height maximum with a proposed 33 feet and 10.25 inches. This is just one of the plan profile views that kind of demonstrates this standard. I highlighted specifically where on the plan profiles the applicant described where base flood elevation, which is the in Tillamook County, as discussed in the staff report, in our V zones, a applicant is required to have the lowest structural member of a building elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation in the V zone. So just wanted to indicate, based on the plans that the applicant has described, they describe where the base flood elevation line is, but also describe that they have shown a 2-foot freeboard above the base flood elevation. Again, the minimum standard is 1 foot for Tillamook County. And then also just wanted to show where they describe the building height. As we know, for the Nesquin building heights, the building height is measured relative to existing grade. It's basically a mirror of the height standard. And just wanted to indicate where that 33 foot, 10.25 inches is observed by the proposed structure. Any questions thus far about the plan design?
Yes.
Melissa, does the property, as we know that the property is kind of on the north end of, well, it is the north end of the complex, but it sits off the beach. And in some ways, it may border Mount Angel, the road, the county road that goes to the, is the border is the northern, both the western and northern border considered beach?
So the state beach zone line is, are you asking about like where the state beach zone line is, or,
Is the property considered beachfront?
yes?
No, it's set back, it borders kind of a county road on that side there, but it is considered beachfront.
It is, because again, the condo planning for the property, it was not a land division, so the definition of an oceanfront lot is a lot or parcel that does not have any, I'm summarizing it probably terribly, but a lot or parcel that abuts the state beach zone line. So the individual units themselves
The
are not
waivers.
lots, right? Because it's the condo planning, so they were not generated by a land division, and even today would not have been part of a land division review. So the lot or parcel is the parent parcel,
Got it.
if I can show you, the
I got it.
1.29 acre is the lot or
So
parcel.
because it's part of the complex. it's
It is,
beachfront.
all development is considered oceanfront.
Okay, thank you.
This was just a quick summary again of some of those applicable development standards that apply again, the 25 height maximum in the Nesquin low density zone. Talking about the flood hazard overlay that is requiring elevation of the structure above base flood elevation. And then just wanted to also call out, there was numerous overlay zones, including the beach and dune overlay. The development standards for geologic hazard were applicable in this area, and the Nesquin Coastal Hazards Area Permit. All of those standards and those overlays would typically require a geologic hazard report to demonstrate compliance with those provisions. Those are all met through the Nesquin Coastal Hazards Area Permit as that geologic hazard report. Their findings maintain the same findings and minimum compliance standards as those other zones. So those have all been met through the previous Nesquin Coastal Hazards Area Permit. I'm just going to do a quick summary of the criteria. Again, the staff report provided the summary of these. But for criteria number 1, just wanted to identify some of the standards here. The applicant did state that there was dimensional constraints that are experienced for the reconstruction, because the plating for Unit 11 maintains very specific development area, and as such, any new construction would have to be maintained within that similar footprint, and therefore they don't, they're limited on the opportunity to increase the width of their structure, and instead really only can go up with the development as well as elevating for the flood compliance. And they also reference that a dwelling itself is a substantial property right that's observed by other properties, both in the Breakers condominium plat, but within the other adjacent residentially zoned properties. And also wanted to point out that the other condos on the unit share a similar square footage of living space, and specifically this proposed development is to benefit from the same area of living space that was previously held by the dwelling that was lost to fire. Criteria number 2 is the variance necessary to accommodate a use on the parcel that can be reasonably expected to occur. As stated, the proposed development is for a single family dwelling. A single family dwelling is expected within the adjacent vicinity, both within the Breakers condominium and the Nesquin R1 zone. It's an allowed outright use. Criteria number 3, this is where we talk about section 4.05, where we talk about enjoyment of preserving rights of adjoining property owners and their uses for their land for legal purposes. Again, a thorough description of this was found in the staff report, but a couple that I wanted to point out again. The applicant talks about the redevelopment for Unit 11 would be maintained within the same footprint as the previous area that Unit 11 was prior to its loss. And therefore, they say it would enjoy the same, adjacent properties would continue to enjoy a similar amount of open space and privacy as they would be maintaining. They would not be further encroaching on adjacent properties. I did want to point out there was no comments from Public Works or the fire department, that the applicant provided their reasonings and findings for why their emergency access would not be hindered as a result of the proposed reconstruction or concerns about traffic as it relates to the new construction as well. Applicant provided findings with regards to pleasing views being obstructed or obtained. They state that the building is both maintaining within its same footprint, and that because the elevation is due to the flood regulations requiring them to reconstruct a similar structure, though elevated, these are not views that are being unreasonably obstructed or obtained by the applicant. For criterion 4, we look at no reasonable alternatives. Again, kind of going back to that similar summary, the applicant is stating that their intention is to work within the existing dimensional limitations for footprint that the original dwelling maintained. And therefore, there aren't reasonable alternatives other than elevating so that they can maintain a similar amount of living square footage and development area that they maintained prior to the loss of the structure. And I would also, again, as I detailed previously with the flood maps, there are a majority of the properties here in this kind of central portion off of Breakers and Nescoin that have experienced a similar reaction due to the updated flood maps, who are now all mapped within the special flood hazard area. So because of the remapping of these boundaries, there is a majority of our oceanfront properties within Nescoin that are now located within the flood hazard overlay that were not previously mapped within that. And so this is a similar circumstance. This property is now experiencing, though the loss of the structure itself was not due to their own desire. They did not demolish a structure, remove it, but it was removed due to a fire itself. And that is all I've got for a summary of the criterion. Unless there's any questions about the criteria or the findings provided in this.
Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right. Then we'll hear from the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Noah Schaefer. I'm a general contractor hired by the owner. My address is in Lincoln City, 1346 Southwest 69th Street, in Lincoln City. So I wanted to give voice to this because the homeowner can't be here. Her name is Maureen O'Donnell. She, along with her family, own the property in a trust, which is why Wells Fargo is mentioned as they manage it. Very quickly, this variance request is about preserving a property owner's right to rebuild their home after suffering a catastrophic loss to their structure. They've taken extensive, thorough steps working with numerous experts and governmental agencies to ensure in every reasonable and possible way they are compliant and meeting the requirements set before them. This includes exploring all available options with a licensed geologist, a team of engineers, and myself, a licensed builder, as well as the various local, state, and federal agencies involved these past 3.5 years. This fire occurred in September of 2022. It's been a process. The hope of building back their home in a manner resembling the one they lost through no fault of their own has been what they've maintained throughout this process. And I can tell you that their preference has always been to build the exact same home they lost. It's become clear as we've gone through the process that that simply isn't possible. As Melissa explained in great detail, we we have to raise this home. The geologist has made it clear that micropilings are required. For those of you that are uninitiated or don't know what that is, you're not alone. Even as a builder, I didn't have any experience with micropilings prior to this. Essentially, we would need to drill down to bedrock, 20, 30 feet deep, and we would need to place our foundational supports into that bedrock. It's an expensive and difficult process, but it's one that will help ensure that this structure will be more resilient and capable of withstanding the conditions of being oceanfront, or in this case, what I feel is a little bit oceanfront adjacent because it is set back. But that said, I think that most of this information speaks for itself. Because Maureen can't be here, and I feel like she deserves a voice in this process, there is a brief statement which was included in the submitted package, but I wanted to take a moment and just read it so as to give her voice in this process. So, to whom it may concern, in order to satisfy all existing elevation, zone, and code requirements, as well as the federal flood risk management standard when building back a structure where one previously existed, we are requesting a height variance of 33 feet, 10¼ inches. In September 2022, our 2-story home experienced a catastrophic fire resulting in a total loss of the structure. While it was our desire to rebuild exactly the same as before, it is not possible with today's building requirements. We have worked diligently with our geologist, architect, and engineering team to devise a plan that will meet each standard and code, beginning with a flow-through foundation supported by micropilings. A quick history of our community. Built in 1972, the Breakers condos were originally 11 identical freestanding homes. Each one consisted of 2 stories, approximately 600 square feet per floor, and totaling 1,200 square feet. With 3 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms, they made the most of the modest space. Because our property is located in a BE 32 zone, it's necessary that the first floor height starts at 34 feet above sea level. This essentially puts the first floor at the height of our neighbors' second floors. Given that, we won't be able to rebuild in an identical fashion. Staying in the original footprint and property boundary, though, means we have 600 square feet to work with per floor. As it was before, we've designed a similar layout with a bathroom by the entryway, then a kitchen and living room leading to the back deck. A staircase ascends to the second floor where all 3 bedrooms and 1 full bathroom are located. We were given feedback and instruction from the Breakers HOA, composed of the other 10 homeowners, that when and where possible, our design should remain true to the original look and exterior appearance. We have reduced the pitch of the roof in order to minimize the finish height. We also worked with our engineer to limit the interior ceiling heights, and we eliminated an attic storage closet contained in our previous home. We have sought to minus every extra inch of height throughout the planning process. We humbly submit these renderings for your consideration and hope you'll approve our variance request to rebuild our home, not as it was, but as similar as is reasonable. Sincerely, Maureen O'Donnell. The final thing I wanted to say is that I think this is a homeowner who cares greatly about the community that they're in, that they're a part of, and they are trying to appease that community to the best of their ability, but they don't want to be forfeiting their rights to rebuild a home that's going to match what they've lost. And it's a balancing act for sure. And they're asking for you to help them to achieve that. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Other questions for the applicant?
Guys,
Go ahead.
You just mentioned, about the owner's rights,
Yeah.
to rebuild.
Yes.
Could you explain a little more what right that is to replicate the 1,200 square foot previous condominium or whatever it's called, versus the 600 foot, which would be allowed roughly now? I mean, in terms of our criteria and our land use,
Sure.
what is the right that you say that we should follow?
That's a great question. And it's something I've thought about too in this process. I think that what I would say to that is the criteria, this 25-foot height restriction predates 2018 when things changed drastically for this land. Property owners have an expectation. They've purchased this property and this is a living space that they've paid for and it has value. It's an asset. And in some cases, it's their life savings. And to retroactively confine them when through no fault of their own, they've lost that structure. And now they're just looking to rebuild it. And again, this is a homeowner who would happily build the exact same structure if it were allowed. That is all she has ever wanted. So to hamstring her to say, well, you can only have half the living space now because we just don't want it to be any taller than 25 feet. Not because it's creating a hazard, just it's something that we don't like the look of. Again, that seems a serious blow to someone, to their finances, to, you know, how are they supposed to even occupy that space? You know, without getting too personal, this is a homeowner with a handicapped family member who's limited with their mobility. This has already created unique challenges for them. And we've been working diligently to try to problem solve all of these challenges. And so when we talk about property rights, what I think is, what if it were me? What if this was my home and I had a natural disaster occur or any kind of catastrophic loss to that home? I would want to be able to rebuild it and recapture what was lost. And I think that that's all that's being asked for here. It just happens that the new restrictions that are in place, the new requirements require us to go up. That's the long and the short of it. We have to elevate. And so in order to preserve those property rights, that's why we're asking for the variance.
So again, the right that you're asking us to consider is the right for a property owner to replicate what they had before after a disaster. Is that right?
I would say so, yes.
So the property owner in this case, as well as everybody else who lives, you're living in a coastal hazard area.
Mhm.
And as we all know, that whole area has drastically changed in the last 30 years. Do you see any risk that the homeowner should take in terms of other types of disasters? I mean, is this going to apply to every other disaster that may occur along the shoreline?
Well, to be clear, this community, many of the oceanfront homes have riprap in front of them that those homeowners maintain, and that is true of this community. So they are doing that, and that is a service to all the homeowners behind them who are at a lower level in some cases. In addition, some of the design of this home is the old home had cedar siding, which is highly flammable. That's part of why it burned so quickly. It was a windy day, it caught fire, it even jumped to the home next to it. The new home will be rebuilt using hardy shingle siding, which is a cement board, which is more fire resistant. The original wood burning fireplaces in all of these homes have been removed, and replaced with electric. So this is a very proactive community in terms of the homeowners that are there at the breakers, as well as this individual owner. And they are being conscious of that. Nobody wants to experience something like this. I can't imagine. You know, it's been 3.5 years that she's gone without her home, trying just to navigate this process. So to answer your question, yes, we are accounting for all of those things as best we can as we plan to rebuild.
All the
this.
risk that it takes living on the shore,
Yes,
that if,
hence the micro pilings and so forth.
and if this home were destroyed from a wave or a log that goes through the house. which
Then all the
happened,
other ones around it would definitely be destroyed too, because this one's
Right.
gonna be built better than.
Right. So as part of the argument you're making here is that any home that's destroyed by a natural disaster, or in this case, a fire, which I don't know if it's a natural disaster, but it's a disaster.
Yeah.
That the idea of take away the risk that you live there within a hazard area. You rebuild the house according to the standards, everybody would be 35 feet right along the lines. That's something
Today,
that
yeah.
we should use,
Yeah, anything being built on those lots today would be,
35 feet roughly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Got a question.
Go ahead, Chuck.
You referenced, you took everything possible to reduce the maximum height.
Mhm.
I thought in the county's testimony that gonna plan on being 2 feet above base flood elevation, which is a foot higher than you need to be to meet the standard. What's the purpose of that?
I got that too. I think originally there was some feedback that we were in a VE 33 zone. And so it was initially, there was some, because if you, I don't know if you're able to pull that up. The other 10 homes are actually all in a VE 33. But this one, because it is slightly set back, is in a VE 32. And I think there was just some maybe a missed edit. And if there's a way to amend it, if that's appropriate, we would amend it down an entire foot, but we're already at this point and I can't speak to that. But if we're fully in a VE 32 and we can shave a foot out of the height, we will do that because we are trying to be respectful to the community that we're in and preserve as much of the views and the enjoyment of those and the natural light that we can do. So we're not trying to get it any taller than we absolutely have to. So again, I don't know if that map shows
The arrow kind of
zones.
covers it, sorry,
but all 10 of the other homes fall into a VE 33. And again, sorry, do you have the one without that just shows the 11 units?
pulling a better map, so.
Thank you. So that's the FEMA map, is that correct?
Yep.
And so you can kind of see the white lines dividing through the property. And the first 9 are fully in the VE 33 zone. And the corner of unit 10 is also in that zone. And then unit 11 is set back. So it is fully in the VE 32. So I think, like I said, it's been a pretty exhaustive process. We've been through so many rounds of revisions and trying to get this type right, that when this got submitted, there was some back and forth, and we weren't clear on if we were falling into that because the whole property itself was treated as one parcel. So I think that's how we ended up with that height to accommodate for the VE 33. But in listening to Melissa's presentation, it sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, Melissa, we can build a foot shorter because we're in the VE 32. No part of this structure will be the VE 33. Correct. Okay. And so we will gladly take a foot out of that to get to the lowest possible height. Did anyone have any other questions?
Yes, what's the constraint on the building footprint?
The constraint on the building footprint is that you have a series of homes that all kind of fit the same basic space requirement. When we weighed different options, taking into consideration the requirements, we determined that basically we have a individual homeowner with a 1/11th share of a large parcel. That the area beyond where their home was originally located is a community area. It does not belong exclusively to them. So they are restricted to their footprint.
Did they ask the association if they could, given
It was
limitations, or did they ask the association if, because there's a large community area there?
Yeah, and
And that it's unusual because of where this particular unit sits.
Yeah.
It kind of borders it very differently than the other 10.
right,
Did they ask if they could just maybe move to the south another 5 feet or whatever?
right. These things were explored. It would be much more than 5 feet. I'm not privy to all those dialogues that were had. You have a group of 11 homeowners. It only takes one to object or say, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair to me. I think that I can't answer definitively all of what was discussed in that. What I know is that the encroachment into common areas was denied, the request to encroach.
So the request for a variance,
The request,
one of the reasons for the request of the variance is because the association refused to
well,
allow
the
them to
association
expand.
couldn't arrive at a consensus that was an acceptable solution for certain homeowners. I know one objection that was raised was that they felt that would actually cut down on views when they're walking by on the street. This would now expand the width of the structure. This would actually block more of the view to the ocean from Breakers Boulevard.
Some going south, expanding south.
You would be expanding north.
Well, if you expanded south, which would
You'd be in
towards the community grounds.
You would no longer have ocean views. You'd be behind unit 10 if you expand to the south.
Right.
So you would essentially, again, this gets to property rights. You would.
So
you
the
would
ocean
cut-
view is a property right here, that's why you wouldn't want to expand to
think-
the south.
There is an expectation when you have an oceanfront home that you can see the ocean. That would be my expectation. Wouldn't that be yours?
But they could still, you're not denying the ocean view, you're limiting the ocean view if you expand it to the south.
Well, if you expand to the south to achieve what you're after, you are substantially impinging on that view and the parking, and you create traffic possible problems. It's something that I can say was explored extensively. Again, it's been 3.5 years. All of these things were at great length weighed and discussed and explored. We arrived at this variance request as a absolute last resort when all else failed. We could not get this structure rebuilt in the same footprint, the same living space standards without building up. So that's how we got there.
For the same square footage.
Right. Again, I want to emphasize, if this was any one of us, we would no way would we be satisfied being told we can build half our home back. That's just not an answer any of us would accept. Nobody would find that reasonable. And that's what this variance is about. What's reasonable? That's it. And we're just asking for you to allow us to build them their home back.
Are there any further questions?
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff,
Go ahead.
and this is for Sarah. When the county passes a land use ordinance that has the potential to reduce property values by putting additional limitations on property, state law requires notification.
Correct.
Since this change took place several years ago, was there any sort of notification that would have gone to the property owner about additional restrictions?
Thank you. When the map updates were done in 2018, if you recall, by September 25th, we had to adopt the FEMA required updates to the flood hazard overlay zone and adopt the accompanying the flood insurance rate maps, the farms. And we did that, and we did do a Measure 56 notice for the unincorporated communities and surrounding areas, and the labels and the maps that were used to determine that, we worked with the Department of Oregon Geology and Mineral Industries to help get the layers and the tax lot identifications to do that Measure 56 notice. So that was done. Something about a Measure 56 notice is it does indicate it may impact property values and property rights. In this case, it doesn't deny someone from building, but with the map updates, as you heard tonight, it can substantially impact their ability of what they would have been able to do previously.
We had public hearing, if I remember, we had
We had several.
public hearings, the planning commission to approve those.
Correct. The planning commission made the recommendation to the board to approve to adopt the updated maps and the revisions to the flood hazard overlay zone. And also to maintain our standing in the National Flood Insurance Program, we had to adopt those new maps and we had to adopt those updates to the flood hazard overlay zone. We would have been out of compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program if we would not have with all of the typical consequences that go with that, including not being eligible for disaster funding relief. So it was a requirement.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Melissa, I'm trying, and looking at the criteria, there's nothing in this request, there's nothing that prevents a rebuild of a structure here. And in the criteria, what is, when we look at a variance, is there anything that we should look at that says that there is, as the applicant said, that there's a right to replicate or to reproduce whatever it was that they had before? Now, the applicant is talking about views, square footage, whatever. There's nothing that says, because you have to reproduce something lesser than what was there before. Which in the criteria, the 4 criteria, do we have to look at to say that they have this right to, in a variance request, to make something whole back again?
Take that one too.
Sure. So Commissioner Seaver, I would like to make a suggestion, please. The next part of this process is actually the public comment period. Happy to come back to that once it's staff's turn again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just so we stay on track with the quasi judicial proceeding. I didn't mind answering Commissioner LaFrance's questions. I thought it was more of a general thing, but I think in relation to this application, we should probably.
I thought we were asking staff questions time, but
No,
I
we need to
apologize.
do public comment first.
I apologize.
It's okay. No, it's a great question. We'll come back to that.
Okay, so it is time for public comment. If you wish to comment and do not have your name on this form, you still can do that. At this point, the only name that I have on here is David Saulnier.
Yes. Like, comment?
Yes, come up, please, and state your name and your address for the record.
Madam Chair, I would encourage anyone who would like to provide comment to raise their hand online.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
My name is David Saulnier. My mother owns Breakers number 5. So 48060 Breakers Boulevard, number 5, Nescoin 97149. She's 83 and I'm the caretaker of her home. She's owned it since 2005. And I'm here to support Maureen's request for a variance. It has been a long time. She and Noah and all those involved have done an amazing amount of due diligence, and it seems to me that because of the new flood maps that have occurred since the homes were built, that allowing a variance beyond the 25 feet makes sense, given that all the powers that be have raised the floor for all homes along the waterfront. So it seems fair to me that is allowed. All the homes behind oceanfront have 35 feet. So they're not even going above that. And I know that there are no impacts to homeowners behind number 11 that would suffer because of building that house higher. If anything, they might actually be able to see the ocean underneath it because it's raised up on pilings. So that's about all I want to say.
Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
And again, if there's anybody online attending this hearing, if you use the raise your hand feature, we could get to you.
So, Madam Chair, Lori Severin.
Shall I begin? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Your name and address for the record, please.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Lori Severino, and my family owns the house at 4315 Mount Angel. And we use the beach access point adjacent to the site. So first, I just want to say I'm very empathetic to the property owner's desire to rebuild their unit after the fire and fully support that. But as noted in the comment letter I submitted, the staff report was incomplete in making 2 of the required findings for the variance request. First, the discussion for criterion number 3 did not analyze how the proposed variance would ensure that pleasing views are not obstructed, which was one of the applicable development standards. In addition, the discussion for criterion number 4 did not analyze all reasonable alternatives to the proposed variance, such as a variance to the lot size or setbacks. It sounds like that was discussed, but more evidence should be provided in the record. As an end unit, there appears to be the unique opportunity to build out instead of up without impacting the frequently used common spaces on the breaker site. So I hope that the owner, Breakers HOA, and the county can revisit these options and find a workable solution that meets the spirit of the height limit and has a similar floor area as the original unit. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else? Melinda Rhodes?
Yes, hello. My name is Melinda Rhodes. I live in Utah, but I own Breakers number 10 next to Maureen's unit. And I would like to speak in support of the height variance. To address the gentleman's question about building to the south, that's not possible because there are water and sewer lines. You still have to have the pylons go down there, and that would significantly disrupt the infrastructure of the entire unit to do that, as well as parking concerns. So we have had numerous discussions over the past 3 years, and this is the most viable solution. I do not think it's going to obscure anyone's views, or views may be different, but they're not going to be completely obscured. And that's the nature of anything, whether it's a house or a tree. Views change over time, light changes over time, but this is not going to completely block it. So I would urge the committee to approve this variance request so that Maureen can rebuild her structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And I trust that you, Melissa and Sarah, have the names of these folks testifying online for the record. Is there anyone else?
Madam Chair, I would recommend if anyone that's participating by phone. Yes, so we do have the phone number ending in 1432 is muted. And if the other person on the phone would also like to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yeah, 1432 would like to speak, if that's okay.
Yes, please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Tom Sheese. We live at 48025 Breakers Avenue. If you look at the pictures there, we're directly across the street from Breakers number 11. And I actually just sent Sarah some pictures of the fire because we were there when it happened. And I totally understand where Marion's coming from and what a challenge this has been. But we also have to understand that living in wherever we live in the village, North Beach, South Beach, that one of these days we're all going to get wiped out by the Cascadia subduction, and we're going to have to start all over again for all of us. And this is very unfortunate for them, but to set a precedent of a 34-foot high structure, which will stand out from the other 25-foot structures, is going to deter our next door neighbors, the Rainy Day, the next door neighbors to them, which are the Tarkianans, to us at 48025 Breakers. So it will be a significant eyesore. I really think that the board was hitting the nail on the head and seeing if they can expand out to the south and sewer lines can be moved. That's not impossible. It sounds like, based on the testimony of the builder, that, you know, they've done a tremendous amount of work, but maybe there needs to be a little bit more effort in the HOA being willing to let them expand to the south. And if they go up 8 feet on that structure as their base floor, they are going to have a gorgeous view of the ocean. So it's not going to hamper their view. Yes, their bedrooms may not be ocean view bedrooms, but their living room and kitchen will be very, very nice. So I can just tell you that the neighbors that are looking through the breakers or around the breakers, it's a significant impact for us. And if we talk about home values, then that's a significant impact for the homeowners that are living on the other side of the street, hence the reason for the original limitation of 25 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Was there another phone number too?
Yes, ending in 2871. If that person would like to speak, they can press *6 to unmute.
Could you repeat the directions again, please, Sarah, in case you didn't hear?
Sure. So please press *6 to unmute to provide testimony.
All right. If there's no more comments, public comments, then we have time for rebuttal from the applicant.
Thank you. I appreciate all the sentiments of empathy that people have suggested. I think it's remarkably easy to suggest that we just build to the south at considerable expense when it's not your money. We don't have a blank check. This isn't somebody with deep pockets. She's not rich. She just wants her home back. This is about what's fair. And frankly, what's right. Just person to person. I'm floored that anyone would object on the basis of what's fair and what's right and what's reasonable to this human being that lost her home and just wants to build it back. She can't afford to dig into the sewer. She can't afford to just start tearing up the ground everywhere just because somebody doesn't like the idea that there's going to be a home that's slightly taller. We all heard it. In 2018, things changed. This is going to keep happening. Other homes are going to have a significant disaster occur. They're going to have to be rebuilt. This is going to come before you again. And to think that you can just tell property owners, too bad. Sorry, you're out your life savings. Sorry, you don't get to have the home you had. You get to have half that home. That's just not fair. I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. I don't think any of you would want that done to you. That's all I can say.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick follow-up of the person who testified on your behalf, who I think is breakers number 4, mentioned that and I don't think I saw this in the application, but that the house would be on, in a sense, on stilts and pilings.
Yeah.
And it was a see-through, is that?
It is, there's a breakaway or it's up higher, but there, you can actually look right through underneath,
How high would the see-through be? I'm just curious.
about 8 feet.
So it's 8 feet, so you're gonna have pilings in the house. Would sit on pilings with 8 feet of open space underneath.
Yeah, you could walk right under it.
Thank you.
Isn't it just like the one in Tierra Del Mar that's at the entrance where it has to be on pilings?
Yeah,
Okay, like, that's what I thought, but
yeah,
questioning it, so.
yeah. And the breakers, clearly, I know that the way your association works, they have to approve any change. So
Right,
they've already voted and approved this design.
yes, correct.
During the testimony, it came out that you could actually lower the structure by 1 foot.
And we'd be thrilled to do it. We, like I said, we kind of, there was some confusion in the maps and how it was being interpreted due to the parcel being a shared. So with 10 other homes, but we can, it sounds like, be a foot lower than what we're already asking for. And if you approve that, we can make that work.
I'll have a question for staff later about whether that would be a condition of approval.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. You sure? Okay. All right, we're back in session. Does staff have any more comments?
Yeah, just some general, comments, specifically want to call out the question or discussion about the flood standards. One, as was, detailed in the staff report, yes, the footprint of unit number 11 is entirely within the V zone elevation 32, so not the 33-foot elevation. Yes, I do concur with Noah. There was original discussions and confusion about the applicability of the elevation 33-foot being applicable to the redesign of the home during initial conversations. But yes, indeed, the footprint of unit 11 is entirely within the 32-foot V zone elevation. As was discussed during my presentation, the pile and pure foundation design. It indeed is, as the applicant has proposed, is basically a see-through design. There cannot be enclosures within the V zone. There's some very express allowances of certain enclosures that can occur with V zone development. And I do want to be honest that some of those can occur when they're for access into a building, but there is not an opportunity for any type of living space to be created under the freeboard in V zone designs.
No utilities or.
Utilities, I mean,
Furnace.
obviously utilities will have to exist. You have to get water up to the living space, so that will have to happen, but
I mean, water tank, furnace.
no type of utilities can be located below the freeboard in
Okay.
these zones. And pile and pier foundation is not just a recommendation, it's a requirement of the zone development. You cannot have standard foundation styles, typical conventional foundation styles in these V zones. And the applicant did include, I will say, there was inclusion of their structural plan and architectural plan views that do show, the only thing that I would say that they would have that exists below that is the stairs that they propose that serve as the access to the upper stories. So those will obviously be located below, but those are permissible, for the construction style. I think part of the consideration that the commission needs to decide when they're making their determination or the request is, and this is something that staff doesn't have a decision on, this is what you as the commission need to decide is the question of whether or not construction can exceed the maximum building height in general in Nescoin for oceanfront properties, or is the question when existing improvements have been destroyed by a natural disaster, a natural cause, is the reconstruction of that a allowance that we would want, especially when additional current standards may change the style of that structure, like elevation in the flood zone. So I think that is part of what the committee needs to decide in when you're deliberating the type of variance before you, the exception that this applicant is requesting. Is there a difference in your opinion, or is it the same, you know, regardless of it being brand new construction for a property that maybe was vacant and was coming in and asking a request to be able to 33 feet and 10.25 inches, or because this is a reconstruction of a use that was lost to no, it wasn't, they didn't come in and demolish this building just because they wanted to rebuild. This was lost to a fire. Is that the consideration for the exception that they want to make?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
can I follow? I just want to follow up on that a little bit, Melissa. So my guess is that everywhere in the county where we have an oceanfront community, unincorporated community, we have a differentiation between building heights along the shoreline versus building heights in the rest of the community. So that's a pretty standard way of thinking about what we who live on the ocean think about that. And there's a reason, views and other kinds of things. And it's not just the houses right directly behind, and people who build their homes behind those first homes, build them with the idea of view. And then there are other homes further back that every home in front affects the view of the beach and the ocean. It's not just the ones that are directly behind. So if, and in Nespelin, I can only think of 3 or 4 oceanfront lots that have not been built on. So there's very few properties where you would have new construction, brand new construction that would come in. So the idea of what you just talked about is someone who came in with new construction, could they build to 34 or 5 feet or whatever the most recent variance approval was. Most of those homes, 90 some properties, I think, I remember when we did a riprap survey, 2015 or whatever it was. I think there's 90 some properties that had riprap along protecting their property. So that's roughly the number of homes that would be directly oceanfront. And then I think that you have a home like this one that kind of sits back a little bit, but is still considered oceanfront. I'm trying to, there might be a couple of others of those in the community, I'm not sure. So if I'm trying to think of, I mean, there's a value to having a limitation on shoreline construction. And by doing this, in reading some of the letters that we received, the concerns about precedent. My concern is that you approve one because of whatever does that, and you're living on the shoreline. There's logs that have gone through homes on the shore in my time there. It is not a new, the other condominium complex, Pacific Sands, that whole bottom floor has been destroyed times because of storms. So it's not out of the potential of major damage being happening to homes along already constructed homes along the shoreline. If we take the argument made by the applicant, you should have a right to rebuild. You're going to have to build up 8 feet high or whatever it is with the new maps. We might as well take the differentiation between shoreline height limits and the rest of the village. There is none, there will be none. And as I see this, and so I guess the question to staff is the precedent issue. Are we, by doing this, I mean, I know you can't fully determine, but I can see anybody else whose home is damaged beyond 50%, they're going to come in and say, you approved this variance because your argument was you have a right to replicate your square footage. Not to they have a right, they can rebuild now a place, whatever it is. The HOA is preventing them from expanding the footprint. The county isn't, the HOA is. So they have to go up. That argument is going to be used every time. And they'll have even more of an argument because they're not being restrained by an HOA like this particular applicant is. So the staff, as you think about it, do you see a precedent being set?
And on the decision that the commission makes this evening and the findings that you make for the decision, it could have precedent-setting decisions on future development.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think one of the things that's relevant in this instance, as a community development director and planning director, of course, this is something that has weighed heavily on my mind too. And I think this also goes back to your question about the variance intent that you asked before public comment.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things. I think Melissa's correct in that the findings for this, this isn't a vacant lot where someone is proposing a new build,
Right.
where there could be other alternatives and options. where there hasn't been, and there hasn't been, to your point, the right to build has not gone away. But they may not get what others in the area have. In this instance, you have a platted and recorded condominium unit. So that building footprint, in addition to what you've heard tonight, is actually a platted footprint. So we're not talking about a vacant lot where they could explore other options for lateral expansion. You know, I mean, if you think about a lot, you have 5-foot side yard setbacks, you have your front and rear. Sometimes we'll do a front yard variance, especially if there's an oceanfront setback line. Even in the NESCO and coastal hazards overlay zone, there's built-in a front yard exception to allow the front yard to go down to 10 feet. You know, to move the house out of the NESCO and coastal hazards overlay zone or safest site. So when it comes to precedents, what I think about is because again, Melissa's correct also about, it depends on your decision and your findings that support that decision. When you have a unique situation where you have a condominium unit that's platted on a larger parcel, that is very different than a vacant lot.
So explain, so why that plat can't be adjusted?
It could be if everybody agrees, right? But they're
So it's the HOA that's preventing it from being adjusted.
potentially, right?
Not the
But then
county, but
there's,
the county's not.
no, the county's not. In fact, we don't review condominium plats,
Right.
right? Because it's not a land division, it's not a land use decision. So I don't know all of the distinct factors for that with the HOA. We've heard testimony about that tonight, but I think when we just start peeling things away to talk about precedent, there are unique factors to this lot that we may not see there are unique factors to this unit that we may not see in other types of variance requests. Going back to your question, so really at the heart of the variance, and it's at the front of the purpose, we look at this all of the time. It talks about, you know, a variance is to provide relief when strict application would cause an undue or unnecessary hardship by rendering the parcel, or in this case, it would be the condo unit, incapable of reasonable economic use. We could spend months going through case law from LUBA about what that means. So you guys have the tough job tonight of making that determination for Tillamook County with those findings.
Sarah, we haven't heard an argument about loss of economic use. We have no idea, for instance, what compensation was given the owner because of the fire and the loss of that building. So that has not been part of the application. So in terms of the criteria, that would be something we would not consider. It was never presented.
So that's the purpose. It's not a criteria. The criteria are the four you're hearing about. Now,
Right.
how that folds in, that could be a finding that you make, you know.
But we don't know, no information's been presented about economic loss. And so we can't consider that, I don't think.
That is something the commission would have to discuss.
Right.
Bill,
Yeah, go right ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment about precedent setting. Is a decision on this will set a precedent on a piece of property that is exactly like this at this location
That's right.
with these limitations. And if there's another property anywhere around, that could be considered a precedent. But for anything else, when you consider a variance, you consider it individually. And so it's highly unlikely that you'll ever get exactly the same set of conditions. So there's a very limited chance of setting a real precedent.
Thank you, Commissioner Fentz. That's a very direct way of saying just with the condo plat and the unit, et cetera.
And just a side comment. That's, if each of these structures was on their own lot, only 1 through 9 would be oceanfront. And this lot would be in the 3rd tier. So it's because it was set up as a condominium rather than individual lots that is putting this restriction on.
I'm sure I got a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
When was this house was built in 71 or 2? When was the height restriction? And that's when, voted on and part of that's when order.
Did you pull the 69? 69.
Yeah, it was, yeah, so, when Filma County first adopted a zoning ordinance in 1969, there was already, that was when we adopted, at the time, it was a 24-foot height standard for, oceanfront properties in our community. In our residential zones, there was not community zones in the original 1969, ordinance until 81. And then, after 81, there was the late 90s when the community plans were actually created, like the NESCO and unincorporated community plans. But there was always discretion between oceanfront properties and in most of our communities having a 24-foot height, and then properties that were not oceanfront having a 35-foot height in our residential zones. And then it was just within this last year with the middle housing where that height went up to 25 feet instead of 24 for our oceanfront properties, but that's really the only change. But yes, it's been relevant since 1969 when the first ordinance was adopted.
Are most of the condominium sites or oceanfront properties this restricted in building size?
In this condo plat or
Well,
any other NESCO properties?
yes. Is it normal for them to be that small where they don't have other opportunities? I mean,
Not at this 25, 30-foot building footprint, no. While there are small lots throughout Nescoin and especially kind of this central area off of Breakers, I would say that there is not substantial consideration of multiple properties being this small. And I'll be also honest too, most of these properties, if not in a condo plat, also aren't, the condo units can build out to their whole 20 by 30 space. Because that's how they plat out their arrangement. Whereas other properties may have setbacks for other boundaries and property lines, but I will say there is not substantial properties at this small size in Nesco and on the.
I'm mistaken, there's conversation around precedent, but I mean, most, since they'd all be looked at individually, they still have to prove that, they can accomplish whatever it is on a single story situation instead of going double story. It's just odd with like a lot of the flood restrictions, like in a floodway, if you have significant damage or have an improvement greater than 50, you're restricted by not being allowed to increase the footprint. So up is the only option you have in those situations, because it doesn't matter if you had all the land in the world to build out without going through zero rise analysis and all this other kind of stuff that you'd have to do to get over that bar.
Okay.
So again, thinking of how this would work with other properties, most oceanfront properties are 2-story. Most, not all, but there are some 1-story older ones, but a lot of the newer ones are 2-story, but under the 25-foot limit. The precedent of everybody's on a restricted site. No one has an unlimited lot on the ocean. the two-story, if some of those homes, I mean, either side of the breakers, especially going north, if they were damaged, significantly damaged more than 50%, and they wanted to rebuild, under the new maps, they would probably not be able to have a first floor. They would only have a second floor. Am I right? I know I'm generalizing here, but I'm trying to think of similarities between what's happening here and what could happen with other two-story homes along the shoreline.
As it relates to the floodplain for the properties here in this kind of central area that were mapped within the flood zone with
Yeah.
the revision. Yes, if there was substantial improvement or some damage where there was having to be a reconstruction, I would say that the variable that I can't relate to you to kind of give you a perfect answer to this is flood elevation is relative to grade at mean sea level. So it's not like I can say, oh, all these properties are gonna have to elevate 8 feet in the air. And so that's a hard distinction to make. Some of them, it might look like a whole story. Some of them, it could be just 3 feet above grade. And while they're on piles and piers, it's not a full other story that they're.
And as you go north from the breakers, they're pretty much on the same level. If you go south, there are,
Right, there's some.
the dunes rise up and those would be very, in fact, we have a 3-story townhouse
Right.
at the end of Salem or wherever it is.
So I would say there's not really a consensus way that I can describe that style of construction as a result of flood.
But if anybody is in roughly the same level, which most of the homes going north, certainly, and there's other places in South Beach and others that would be the same. So they would also have the same type of issue, even though this is part of an HOA, even though this is a very small lot. Lot sizes are defined, it doesn't make any difference the size, they would not be able to necessarily reconstruct the same square footage if they lost their first floor.
Again, I think that's an oversimplification because again, I think the,
It depends
no,
on,
I see the difference.
depends on the sea level height.
The discretion of quite a few of the other properties, like we talked with Chad about, a lot of the other properties that are on the ocean front in Mescaline that are not in platted condo lots do have lateral space that may be able to be considered. So even though the physical structure has to be elevated, they may be able to laterally expand even while elevating to maybe get a version of the same amount of living space that they had previously. That could be something that's explored with these other properties.
And there are houses to the south where you actually have 2 lots west of breakers, where there wouldn't be any place to expand back. There are some places like, including, by the way, at Mount Angel, where we had the testimony. There's 2 lots actually in west of breakers.
I
You wouldn't
think,
be able to.
I'm so sorry, Commissioner Seaver, I think in terms of precedent. So you're talking about if the structure is damaged and has to be replaced. I think the other piece of the conversation that's relevant to this is whether it's Nescoin or anywhere else in the county. When you have a 25-foot height limitation for oceanfront properties. And when you think about the number of properties along our coastline in our communities that are in these mapped areas of special flood hazard, whether they've always been or they are now from the 2018 maps. The other thing is that we are required, not just for destruction, but for maintenance to track substantial improvement. FEMA requires it. So when someone makes improvements, even maintenance improvements to their home, roof repair, new roof, new siding, whatever it is, we are required to track that value. And when those values hit that 50% substantial improvement threshold,
They gotta meet the state.
which we have to track in perpetuity. So unlike non-conforming reviews, It does not roll over every 5 years. It is forever. So eventually, even just through maintenance, several homes are going to hit that substantial improvement threshold, and they are going to be required to elevate.
Right.
Right? So I think the other piece of this
Or
is,
not necessarily elevate, to remove living space from that.
well, that's my point, is the precedent, I think, that comes with a decision tonight, should you approve this, is that when structures have to be elevated to comply with FEMA requirements, will the county require alterations of those structures, like the second floor, to comply? Or will we be bringing variances to you because to elevate, they will exceed those maximum height limits?
And that's the precedent. we're
And it
talking
could
about.
be in any zone with any height. There are 35-foot structures or 30-foot structures with a 35-foot height limit, but it all depends on the base flood elevation. Like Melissa said, it depends on mean sea level. But even all of that being said, it's a unique situation that this isn't a new build. This isn't on a vacant lot. You know, there are reasons why these decisions become important, whether they're approved or denied, which in my discretion to bring this proposal to you, this is important because these findings and the decision will set those precedents of either we're supporting that and those elevations and recognize that as an appropriate variance, or are we not?
And in Nescoin, since we only have a couple of open lots in the shore, it is a precedent for every of those 90 some whatever properties that have homes there.
And do you want?
We won't have many new builds.
No, but it's also that is the decision through precedent to carefully look at those to consider whether or not that variance should be granted because it's simply an elevation for flood risk reduction and FEMA compliance.
Right.
Or is it something to where when we look at those elevation requirements, even just for maintenance with that substantial improvement threshold, will the conversation result in we have a precedent of saying no? And then you're looking at alteration of the structure. I think there's a lot of important pieces that go with a decision like this with precedent and unique factors specific to, in this case, elevation requirements to comply with FEMA.
I can add to that just to even provide you something similarly that you guys saw about a year ago. There was a height variance for an oceanfront property that you guys approved in Nescoin for a 38-foot tall building in a 24-foot oceanfront property. Now, granted, their considerations were not for flood regulations, but going back to Dawn's statement about any decision that you render, the precedence is yes to those very specific conditions or those very specific items that you're looking at. I think that is when we talk about what precedent are you setting and what are the parts of those considerations. In a similar fashion, you could say a precedence for allowing for building heights to exceed 24 feet on oceanfront properties in Nescoin. And if you were saying that was the only version of the precedence that you were creating, you already have that. But again, the age variance that you ever see is going to have whatever unique scenarios are being pertaining to the decision you're making. So it's not just, it may not always just be very specific. It's an oceanfront property in Nescoin that's subject to a height and we therefore are granting an exception or not. It's every unique situation that creates the scenario that you're in and why you're having to be presented the exceptions you are.
That's a good point, Melissa, but and the one we did approve because of the slope,
Right.
there was no view interruption. In fact, the neighbors who would be impacted by the view said there's no impact at all because of the way the slope was. And I think we even had the fire chief or the district support that because of the safety issues.
Yeah.
Very unique situation. So I think to Sarah's point is It's not that we want to eliminate the variance request,
Right,
Right.
right, and I think that's what I'm. trying to
Everybody-
get to is-
but there are some variance requests that may set more precedent than others. And
It's what you.
if somebody, if, as we've had homes along shoreline, where the log goes through my front window. And because of the cost of repair is gonna reach X.
Mhm.
A decision may be different and require that house to. You know,
Right.
whatever. This is not that case. Okay, thank you. I mean, that's a good. example. Thank you.
Well, and I think if you're like tracking empty lots, I mean, most lots are generally larger, have a bigger building area than 30 by 20. Like for other homes that have been built and have to do the pilings, their lot isn't that small. Their buildable area that they're allotted is not. So you could put yourself on pilings and have 1 story, but you could build in, like, you have twice as many feet to build in, so. I think that as a condo, like, cause the lot is whatever, 1 point whatever acres. And that's what it's being judged on, right? But you put all these little houses on it. So their buildable space isn't going to be equivalent to the vacant lot down the road, or if another lot's house was destroyed, their whole lot, not part of this condominium situation, like.
With the limitation on the lot here is not because of it's because of the HOA, not because of the county. So
Well, I
that's a
understand
very
that, I'm
different-
just saying it's, you're taking, I don't think we can compare said empty lot or said lot next to it, that their house burns down. Because they're a whole lot that has a larger buildable area than what is granted here. And I think, I mean, and the argument was made by the applicant. Would you want to lose your 1,200 square foot house and only be able to have 600 square feet? I mean, that's not necessarily the criteria, but it's, I don't think we can compare empty lot versus condominium lot to each other.
I think the comparison more is homes, lots that already have existing homes on them. Sure.
But there's still a whole lot, like, I mean, they're obviously not as big as this particular lot, but they're gonna have a very likely to have a larger building space than 20 by 30.
That was a choice though, the owner made to build on that.
Don, did you have something?
Yes, when Sarah was talking about maintenance adding up to the 50%. Maintenance is usually because a value has gone down because something is worn out. How can you total that up continually? And what determines the 50%? What you bought the house for in 1950 or what it's worth today?
So, one, I'll talk about how the valuation is done for flood compliance. So, the way our code is currently written with regards to what constitutes a substantial improvement. One, our valuation is calculated over a 5-year period. So what happens is, say year 1, we base it off of the real market value of the structure as assessed by our county assessors. So it's not an assessed value just that an applicant can propose. To have a static valuation, we felt it was important to relate to a single source. So we use the real market value of just the structure, not the land, of the improvement as it proceeds with any development. Development is man-made change. So that's why maintenance activities can be considered development if it is made change made to the structure. So even if it's not an expansion of footprint, it's just like Sarah said, siding or roofing, or maybe there was a wall that was moved in the inside of the building. If the valuation is low, we can use a narrative of in year 1, I'm gonna use straight values. The value of the building was $100,000. And the applicant comes forward and is like, I'm gonna move this wall to make my bedroom bigger on the inside. It's gonna be a $5,000 project. Great. That is not a substantial improvement. I don't have to worry about that maybe forcing new flood regulations. There's some things there depending on the age of the buildings, but basically that is just the value that I'm now tracking. So year one, I'm saying, all right, they've only put $5,000 into it. But I'm saying the value is starting at $100,000. In year three, they could come in and say, we're gonna do a massive remodel of our basement. We're gonna get all of the living space and we wanna do all these improvements to it. It's gonna cost us $40,000. Great. We still have to use the value at the beginning of the 5-year period, so we're still saying $100,000 your mark. But now over the 5 years, we put 5,000 and then 40, so we've only hit $45,000. So this whole basement remodel might be us still saying, we've only done a non-substantial improvement, you're not required to comply. It could be on year 5 that they're like, we needed to update our roofing. And we're gonna put $6,000 to do our roof, and I'm like, cool. Now that $6,000 project in that 5-year calculation, we have now amassed over 50% of the real market value starting in that 5-year period. Now the roofing project may be requiring the entire building to come up to that substantial improvement threshold and come into current flood compliance.
And during the pickums, when we had those conversations, and if you recall, staff had very deep, heavy conversations, extensive conversations with FEMA. It was made known that actually in their updated rules, it is not the 5-year cycle, it's in perpetuity. And how we determine that is the value of the job. So anytime a building permit is required, technically we are supposed to get a cost analysis of time and materials to go with that job, to document it, to keep track of it. Some jurisdictions have an actual checklist, like the city of Tillamook, that you have to fill out. And so to Melissa's point, it could be something very simple that pushes you over that threshold at any time. So we don't know. One of the things that we do is we track the values through building permits and those job values. Part of it, FEMA wants us to track everything. So if you replace cabinets or if you replace carpet, technically they're supposed to report that. But Commissioner Uzell, you may go somewhere for designer custom made cabinets, and I'm going to go to IKEA, right? There's an equity issue there also in terms of the value of those improvements. And you could hit a threshold sooner than I could, right? And so that is where we track that diligently based on the real market value of the structure with those time and material costs that come in with those permits. But it will eventually happen to properties in mapped areas of special flood hazard that do not meet elevation requirements. And as the maps continue to get updated by FEMA over time, those minimum elevation requirements may go up. So this is a reality of something that we will continue to talk about in the future.
I have a question. Could you shed some light, so to speak, on what sort of investigations have been done about views? As in people saying that their views are going to be obstructed or are obstructed. How does that shake down legally? And what is our responsibility? Talk about that a little, please. Sorry.
No, it's a good question. It's a good question.
It's a fair question. I think I want to point out one specifically first, just the wording of the criterion as it relates to the discussion about views.
Yes.
To ensure that pleasing views are neither unreasonably obstructed nor obtained. So I think part of this too is, it's not a question of just are
Is it?
views impacted or not. It uses the term unreasonably obstructed nor obtained. And so part of this, I think, is both the applicant provided their reasonings and findings for why the views that may, we could say, be impacted as a result of a taller structure, why it is not an unreasonable request, or why they're not unreasonably being obstructed as a result of the action that they've proposed. But then I think specifically with regards to the testimony, especially the written testimony that was distributed this evening, it came in after the staff report, so I'm gonna be very honest with you. There hasn't been much investigation into the testimony that's been received this week to say, like, staff go out and actually be like, oh, the property address 480 Breakers. I didn't go out and do a stand at their property and go, yes, that is what I would expect to see from like a visual impact. So I'll be honest, for the commentary that's been received this week, staff have not gone out and actually done a view assessment themselves. But I would say too, part of this is we really rely on the applicant to provide those findings to the criteria. And the planning staff's responsibility at this point in time was just to say whether or not they provided an analysis, or really what did they supply for that analysis. And part of your decision tonight is whether or not that is adequate evidence that you think for those findings, those criterion.
Right, the burden of proof would be on the applicant, so if that is something you would be interested in, then continuing the hearing to give them time to provide that information and that evidence is something the planning commission could definitely consider.
Thank you.
There was only one other point that I wanted to make, and it was part of the conversations the commission members were having. But there was a question of I can't remember the way you stated it, but about what is the right, and is it a criterion about, you know, the square footage that they're enjoying and whether or not that's considered a right. The criteria number one specifically, and this is again just for your consideration, talks about one, what is the circumstance that's creating this, but this specifically says would effectively preclude the enjoyment of a substantial property right enjoyed by the majority of landowners in the vicinity. So part again of your determinations and your discussion needs to be, is that a substantial property right? And specifically the applicant did in their submittal talk about the other properties in the Breakers condominium having a 12,000 or 1,200 square foot living space, and or other adjacent properties having similar, if not larger, square footages of living space. That was their expressed finding, was considered a substantial property right that's enjoyed by other property owners in the vicinity. So part of your considerations will need to be whether or not you agree with that finding, or if you think you would consider that a property right as well. So just wanted to provide that for context with during your considerations, because the applicant did indeed provide findings for that in their submittal.
Go ahead.
As you look at the criteria, I mean, the view has, it's not just the notion that we're talking about, it's the view now of a structure. People who are living adjacent on the other side of Mount Angel, people living on Breakers, their view is going to be the only house on stilts 8 feet high in front of them, and that's going. Is that part of the view consideration in terms of the criteria?
I would say that would be up to you to consider, of that, especially to ensure pleasing views are neither unreasonably obstructed nor obtained. I think that would be your consideration if you would equate that to a criterion.
Right.
And are you referring to the aesthetic?
Yes.
So we do not regulate aesthetic through the land use ordinance.
So the view does not include what you're building in front of you, how it looks and.
Right, like if somebody used sheet metal siding and somebody used cedar, like that generally is not a consideration of whether or not you find it pleasing to look at certain siding material. You know?
Right. So we're only talking about a view that's obstructed, not what's in that view.
Staff had any further comments? Are there any further questions for staff? Go ahead, Tom.
We talked about, adding a condition to meet what came out to be a 1 foot lower first floor level requirement. And would you have a proposed condition to meet that requirement, making the structure 1 foot lower in
If
height?
I could work on wordsmithing something,
I
if that
wanna,
was your consideration.
on page 3 of the staff report, it already says that it's in a VE 32 zone.
Right, I think, to confirm, Commissioner LeBranch, you're specifically asking if we have a recommendation for a condition. If you were to propose a revision. I don't know if this is the time and place to consider that unless you guys are prepared to deliberate. I don't know if you've decided whether or not you plan to make a decision this evening.
Right.
But by all means, if that is something you guys would choose to pursue, I'm happy to begin wordsmithing an idea of how to prepare findings.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to clear up that it is possible to meet the requirements by having the first floor 1 foot lower and thereby having the overall height 1 foot lower.
Correct, yeah, as with I would say, at the plans as demonstrated in the submittal.
Mhm.
So I can't speak for if there's any plan revisions or if new information such as like where utilities would be located comes to light, but the lowest structural member, so this isn't the living floor, but the lowest horizontal structural member has to be elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation. With the drawings that the applicant has prepared, there was not an elevation certificate that was supplied in here. Again, the flood review has not, the flood permit review itself has not occurred yet. It will, if approved, occur at a later date. But based on the plans and my familiarity with them, yes, they've over elevated 1 foot. So I could see this specific design, if they just dropped it a foot, would comply with our current flood regulations of the 1 foot freeboard. Yes. And you could consider a condition that propose that through that style. Yes.
Thank you.
Does the commission feel that we have all the information that we need at this time to deliberate, or is there any other? All right, then I close this hearing, all testimony, and we can discuss them among ourselves and reach a conclusion, hopefully.
Well, to me, Madam Chair, the issues are pretty clear. I understand the potential of getting different variance requests of people within this zone, flood hazard zone, where they're moving a wall or something like that. That's something that I think that myself as a commissioner, I would hope the commission would be amenable to if a house were destroyed or significantly damaged from a natural disaster, and we are talking about, in this case, happened to be a fire, but the biggest risk to these homes in the same area is, of course, the ocean. And so any variance request that came forward would, in fact, essentially eliminate the 25-foot height limit along the shoreline, in my view. So for reason of precedent for those kinds of when home or is destroyed for whatever reason, I think this would be a precedent setting to significantly change the shoreline and significantly change the views of and people who bought homes behind these homes, how they built their homes. And we saw in testimony, people bought homes or built homes with this height limit, in fact, in mind. The other reason I'm going to vote against this is there are other options. The county is not imposing any limitation on a change in this footprint. It's the HOA. And we have, over the years, been not held to any HOA restrictions or requirements. We said that's not our business. And in this case, it happens to be something that the HOA has done with these homeowners, this homeowner. And it's, in my mind, it's not the commission's role to accept a change that's been required by an HOA. So I think for those two things, I'm not going to approve, not vote to approve this application.
I would have a little discussion. I think that the essence of a variance is to consider that instance, the particularity of that property at that time in that context. So I don't think that granting a variance really sets any sort of a precedence at all. And furthermore, I think that change has happened. Anything that gets damaged is going to be on stilts, whether they're this tall or that tall. And for better or worse, that's the reality that Nespwa and other coastal towns are going to live with now. It's going to change views. It's going to change the way towns look. Just like, remember Pacific City before all the houses along the river got jacked up? It was a different place. And protecting views is, yes, why those height restrictions were initiated in the first place. But I don't think that this request for a variance and this height is unreasonable, considering the fact that the replacement of the house is necessary because of the fire, and the elevation of the house is necessary because of regulations beyond anybody's control. That's my point of view on it.
I think that a destruction of a home, regardless of whether it's fire or a wave or whatever, is going to happen. And and we've actually had another fire of another home along the coast in my 20 years, 20 years, along the shoreline. But I do anticipate, because of a lot of issues we don't want to have to get into, that there's going to be homes damaged along the shoreline, and we're going to see homes on stilts. And I can envision that whole part of the shoreline, homes only on second story, single floor, with no bottom floor and beyond stilts. I think that's, yes, that's going to happen. Now, do we, by doing this, saying, well, if I lose my first floor, which I think is a good possibility over time, do I get the right to build another floor on top so it would be a 3-story structure? So that's what we're talking about here. I mean, I get the idea, and there's as you know, there's a lot of 2-story homes along there. I can see them losing their first floor. And I know in some homes, they decided their whole bottom floor is not any essential living quarters. As you know, also, many of those homes, they're built their main living quarters on the second floor, knowing that they have the potential of losing that first floor. So being on stilts, I get that. That's why I don't think this is as unique as said. I don't think it's a unique situation, except they have options that other homes will not have. Megan brought up the idea that there are some homes that have a bigger lot they could expand to the east. Yes, that would be a possibility. In this case, we have a home in an HOA that has other options of expanding. It's only the HOA that's restricting the expansion. So that would be my response.
Is there any further discussion? Or are we ready for a motion?
I think the only, Madam Chair, I think the only thing I would add is, know, I think the height is only one thing you're evaluating in all these things, you know, and then those things play a big role, you know, and anytime your property is damaged, blown down in a tornado or hurricane or, well, you know, we have to adapt. And I would imagine over time, you know, lots of areas, they just, you talk about the one in Pacific City, you know, you see in a lot of these areas, in the river areas, all elevated. And then the ones that aren't elevated are continuing to be damaged. And those are other hazard areas, and this house wasn't damaged by that type of repetitive damage, hazard damage that occurs over time. They do have to adapt to the new rules, and that's what boogers is, when your house burns down and you gotta, now that all these other restrictions are allowing you to get back at least what you had, it's not like you're asking for more. I know this commission has been entertained in all sorts of height, building height on the coast situations over time. And that height stuff, the county may need to reevaluate over time of where that lies importance, right? Are we not gonna work on trying to beam structures into tsunami compliance and these different things because of height? So I don't, you know, I guess I don't see it as precedent. You know, it's about a family trying to be whole again. So I feel pretty comfortable.
This is not a primary home, you know. So it's different in that sense.
Well, and I get that, and you know, Oregon, Tillamook in general, being as tourist as we are, and as much of our housing being second in recreational homes, I guess, seasonal or summer, whatever you want to call them. It is a huge, huge part of our economy and our property taxes and all these kinds of things. So I mean, it's a huge influx in dollars in that community that way. So I still think it's nuclear.
We are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve number 851-25-000-533-PLNG, a variance request to exceed the 25-foot height maximum by 8 feet, 10 1/4 inches for a maximum building height of 33 feet, 10 1/4 inches. based on the staff report, the written and oral testimony, the variance criteria, and including conditions of approval 1 through 9, with an addition of condition 10 to state that if the flood level standards allow the first floor level to be lowered by 1 foot, then the maximum height in condition number 7 shall be reduced by 1 foot.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve 851-25-0000533-PLNG. The variance request to exceed the 25-foot maximum, with conditions 1 through 9 and the addition of a condition 10. All in favor signify by raise your right hand. Opposed? 4-1. Do you have the condition 10?
I think what staff can do is, as we prepare the order, I think we can provide a version of what Commissioner LaFrance
Okay,
provided and verify with the chair at the time of signing
Yes.
that meets the intention of your described condition. Is that adequate?
And it's recorded, so the recording's done.
Right, yeah. We have the verbal recording too, so we can use the language you use as part of your recommendation.
Say that again.
We record the meetings,
Oh.
so we can
good.
use the recorded version of the language you provided in the condition. But yeah, we can generate that and provide that to the chair at time of signing the order.
I review them before I send.
Yes, you
We'll have the audio recording ready for you too.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right. Oh, elections.
Again,
We decided, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
to leave them and then.
First not here, let's get him.
That's right. That's right. He's chair forever. Authorization, we need that. Do we need to have an authorization for the chair to sign appropriate orders?
So move.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to authorize the chair to sign the orders. I'll signify in favor by raising your right hand. 5. Administrative decisions, any comments on those? Any questions about those? There is not a housing commission update because the housing commission is not meeting right now, so. Is there a Department of Community Development report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually, since our meeting 2 weeks ago, I do not have an updated report on anything notable. Except for, as of right now, we have nothing scheduled for July. I will be, working with Mr. Kearns on, I will be working with Mr. Kearns tomorrow to finalize some of the draft language for Oceanside, so that I can get that to DLCD as part of the PAPA process and get the Measure 56 notice out. So I'm hoping we will be done tomorrow. It may take us one more follow-up meeting, but we're almost there.
But that still won't be in July.
No, because we're looking at a minimum, once we can get it noticed, 35 days. So I'm thinking September. I've had some great meetings with Mia Connie, taking the same approach as I started with Oceanside. We've done a lot of data research to look at trends in the size of homes, to look at what would be appropriate for a lot coverage maximum, potentially a floor area ratio. And those conversations have been very, very good and insightful. So they're moving along, and hopefully they will be shortly after Oceanside, and then all of our fix-it stuff is done. For now.
Yeah.
And then
Till
we'll
it
start
comes around
talking
again.
about lighting, and then the Nescoin Community Plan. Guys, part of the land use subcommittee, they're working really hard. It's been a great process. I am working on some final policy draft language proposals. And our goal is to wrap that up hopefully in the next couple of months, so we can get that to hearing this fall as well, so. And then actually I'm meeting with DLCD next week, the Tillamook Bay dredging project by the Army Corps of Engineers. Got to get the, goal exception and so, or excuse me, some of the legislative text amendments before you for goal 16 updates, so that project can move forward. So I'm also meeting with DLCD to get that to you. The Coastal Zone Management Act, so the land use compatibility statement that any project has to bring forward to DLCD. It's a coordinated state review for consistency. They have paused their review to October, until October, to give us time. So I've got a timeline I'm working on to try to meet that. So DLCD and other state agencies can also resume their work. So
Does the coastal management group of DLCD have, I mean, the discussion we just had concerning shoreline properties and building heights and changes in flood zone. Do you anticipate, is that group looking at that issue, and do you anticipate anything coming from DLCD on this issue?
not in terms of building heights, because that still has been left to the local jurisdictions to decide. But right now, so I sit on LOAC, which is the local advisory committee. So it is an extension of LCDC. And so I work with LCDC and help them prepare essentially as a local official for hearings. And right now we have some pretty big legislative amendments coming on the table, specifically Goal 17 shoreland updates that talk about accessibility to the beach. That's a big part of it. And then there will most likely be Goal 18 amendments for non-structural shoreline stabilization guidance. And all of those things will relate to, I mean, those things do take into account, they're looking at climate change, sea level rise. So I think you're going to see it indirectly as resiliency efforts to promote resiliency in communities, but none of it will be in relation to maximum building heights in a zone.
Or structure, like what we did in Nescoin with the coastal hazard overlay zone and building some of the safest site, that kind of stuff.
Right.
You don't see that coming. There
Not,
was discussion about,
yes, but not in the bodies of work that I am seeing right now.
okay,
But I anticipate those conversations to continue.
right.
You know, there's other things that we're working on, like battery storage sites. Substations, there's a lot of energy needs across the state, either to improve energy infrastructure or promote green energy infrastructure. So I'm looking at a lot of language right now that will be going to LCDC for consideration from DLCD, but I don't have any. There's nothing definitive to share at this point, or anything I anticipate for us to make updates on at this time.
So the whole Nescoin effort to come up with a coastal hazard overlay zone came out of this climate ready, coastal climate ready communities movement. Which became how do we prepare for climate change and what's happening with the ocean and storms and wave heights and all that kind of stuff. So that's not driving any land use issues.
To my knowledge, no other coastal community has taken that step yet in the way that Nescoin did. I know it's part of long range and future planning efforts. We just haven't seen those come around specifically yet to our local zoning ordinances. I don't think it's not an if, I think it's a when, but I don't know. And I would say there's so much focus on the state level about housing and housing work right now. Some of this other stuff is getting, I would say tucked in, but the two biggest things are housing and infrastructure.
And speaking of housing, is there anything in this federal bill that was passed by Congress that is still waiting to be signed by the president about housing? And I read just some brief descriptions that they're eliminating some of the regulation around housing and new housing and stuff. Is that, I don't know if you've seen
I
the
have,
bill that was passed by Congress, but I'm just curious if it's going to affect housing in
here,
the area.
my comment has been, Oregon is committed to building safety because we have some of the most robust building codes. There's work being done at the state level and at the federal level. I don't know what that looks like for us yet at the local level, but I anticipate we will be having conversations in the future, probably not too far.
Sounds like the federal government's looking at eliminating regulation.
I agree, but whether or not that happens specifically in states like Oregon is yet to be seen.
Yeah.
So, for not having an update, that's my update.
Great.
Chairs out.
Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Well, I'm gonna wait for the builder finds bedrock. And the last person that did a drill was 100 feet down, and it was all sand.
Adjourned.